Alright, time for some more illogic. Last time we went over our week 4 match against the Wooper Troopers. Please go check out the video first if you have not done so already, as we went over the team builder and battle in which, spoiler alert, the Bouffalant trounced their previously undefeated opposition 6-0 with a sub-Salic Cartana sweep. That brought our record up to 3-1 with a plus 12 differential, good for first in the league as part of a 6-way tiebreaker. This time we've got these surging 2-2 Route 1 Birbs. Timestamps will be in the description. FruitTaco and I go way back, starting with a controversial match in Season 7 for my gym defense team, where we both experienced some game-changing hacks. We both ended up as part of the Elite Four in defense, and while Michael was the one to take down the champions run there. We avoided each other in the Season 8 regular season, but in the quarterfinals, his 4-seeded team faced my 5-seeded team, where Arctivish ran rampage through his team, sweeping through without too much difficulty. We then had the fortune of beating him 3 times in the Season 9 Multi-Battle League, including a semifinals match where he and Steve brought a magnificent setup, fling Furamosa into Weakness Policy Bronzong, and to psych up Telepathy of Top Buffini for Bronzong and Sylvalia to explode, which probably would have worked had we not brought Sleep Powder on Tangrowth and hit in the exact right team members to hit Fini just hard enough to bring it down. He definitely has a history of unorthodox strategies, making him very tough to prep against. Though we've had success against him, Michael is also the Season 10 champion, and after a rough start to the season, took down Steve's Wobbuffets that we fell to in Week 3, and then the later on to bring them back up to 2-2. They are hot right now, and, well, cat's out of the bag here. This is not my normal opening screen here, and that's because this is part of a collab here with Michael doing the match of the week. We decided on this one. Michael is actually joining us here now, so Michael, introduce yourself.
Yo, it's me. I'm Michael. I'm FruitTaco, coach of the Route 1 Birbs, host of the feature match on the Wooper Club main channel, and excited to be here. You going over that history between us, I don't know what it is about going up against you, just brings out the inspiration in my team building. Shout out to Utility Umbrella.
Oh boy. Yep, that our first match with the hurricane missing in the rain, thinking, what is happening? That was a fun introduction to the league for you, for sure. Again, a couple of hacksy moments in just that battle, let alone since then. But it's been a blast every time we've gotten the chance to face off. And obviously, with this being the match of the week, this was another fun one. We'll see what all goes into that. But first off, I do want to mention, this will not include the battle itself. That will be a second part to this, a companion video, if you will, on the main channel that will be led by Michael over there. But for now, we're going to go over full in-depth the team breakdowns, what our thoughts were going into the battle. Hopefully this will prove useful for a lot of people in and out of the league and all throughout Draft League. So Michael, we're going to go over your team first, and after a couple transactions, wow, is your team suddenly looking very terrifying.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Of course, picking up Cobalion and Thunderous this is their first week eligible. Was really excited to use them, and, looking at the matchup, I thought they actually both had a pretty good matchup here. So, looking at the matchup, there were definitely some Pokemon here on my team that just weren't coming. Pincurchin, I like Pincurchin, but gets stuffed by Lantern, Swampert, it's got bad speed, it's just not good here. Runerigus has some fun things it can do. I mean, it's got great stabs, but its usual wanting to, get a weakness policy boost or something in Trick Room just was not working with your team. So, I really saw that I was going to have to bring my kind of harder hitting, more offensive pieces to this matchup. And kind of, similar to kind of how Steve analyzed your matchup, was like, well, I just have to knock him out before he can knock me out. Did you have kind of a similar realization?
Honestly, yes. I actually would even start with those same two as being about the only two that I thought you wouldn't be able to bring. I really am impressed with all the electric offense, but I also think I may have one of the better matchups in the league against that, with 3 immunities to all those electric types that you've got, and also the speed tiers at the top were kind of difficult and tough to deal with as well, which is why I thought, yes, I may have to do that offensive approach, but you may be able to just out-offense and out-trade me, because some of those lower speed tiers are bulky enough, yet strong enough, and at the higher end, a lot of those just outspeed me naturally, so this was a pain to prep for sure.
Yeah, so kind of going off that, we talked about, I'm not bringing Pincurchin, I'm not bringing Runerigus. Glaceon, has Freeze Drive for the Lantern, hits the Nidoqueen, who is very scary here, hits Kartana on the special side, Tornadus, but, it really wanted the power of Specs and needed the speed of Scarf, and it just seemed a little too awkward in this matchup, so I didn't end up bringing it. And then we get into, the real contenders here. Obstagoon, I tried to make work forever. Looked at Scarf Defiant, Scarf Reckless, regular Flame Orb Guts, but the speed tiers in this were just so awkward for Obstagoon. A Tornadus U-turn, a Rabombi bug move, speed tying an Arcanine that could have close combat, Hydreigon hitting with a Focus Blast, Carton. I just never felt comfortable with any sets I came up with, so I ultimately left them on the bench. And then the kind of surprise leave out for my team, Zeraora, it isn't bad, but I knew Volt Absorb Lantern was going to come, which it really, really dampens it. The speed is great, but I expect you to have at least one Scarf somewhere. I Intimidate from the Arcanine. I just, similar to kind of to Obstagoon, didn't feel super comfortable with how, I was kind of going any of the sets I came up with. It just felt like it gave you too much wiggle room to respond to. Were any of those mons that you were really expecting to come?
Yeah, of those, I think Obstacle was the one I expected the least. I knew there was a possibility, but I definitely felt that same awkwardness you were. The fighting coverage looked pretty decent, if not pretty great anyways, especially with Runerigus probably not coming and Thundurus being a little bit frail on that side, so I think I could pack my team full of that. Glaceon also kind of felt like the awkward maybe 7th mon on there. I was always very afraid of it coming, but I totally agree with what you said about the speed tiers. Yes, its offense was very strong, but yes, I could also probably revenge it with most anything. I had, again, a lot of fighting coverage that I could easily bring, among other things there for sure. So as far as the Zeraora goes, that was definitely something I was very concerned about. The first time I drafted Tornadus, the only time that I had left it behind was against the Zeraora matchup, and the first time I drafted it. I know the pressure that puts onto that mon in particular, plus having access to something like Close Combat or Play Rough for the Hydreigon, and even a special Aura Sphere that you could toss in there for Kartana, coverage like Grass Knot for Swampert too. I thought it had a pretty good matchup, but honestly, by the time I constructed my team, I can definitely see where you're coming from, and that I had quite a few answers. As you said, the Lantern, the Nidoqueen as well, made it pretty awkward. I really can't blame you for leaving it behind.
Yeah, so then moving on to what I did eventually end up bringing, Cobalion and Thundurus, I just picked them up, could use them this week, I love both of these Pokemon. Cobalion was just a fantastic Hydreigon answer, and the biggest thing about it was I know how much you love knockoff. And having a justified Pokemon there that can discourage the use of dark moves from the Hydreigon, from, knockoff from Kartana, Thundurus, anything in between, as well as just having, Steel Stab for the Rabombi, which honestly I was expecting, Close Combat to hit Kartana that's locked into something that's not Sacred Sword, the Hydreigon, has coverage for, Nidoqueen, and there's the bulk to be able to stay in and chunk things like the Lantern, the Bronzong. It seemed like it was going to be a real good utility piece on this team here. And then the Thundurus, Steve showed in his match against you just what insane use of all the coverage that Thundurus can get is, combined with just strong electric stab. So it also has great speed tiers, most importantly outspeeding the Kartana. So I saw that as, being something that I definitely wanted, and was a much needed ground immunity because Nidoqueen looked like an absolute monster here. Then, we move into, Ferrothorn, which was a pseudo Kartana check, pseudo Lantern check. Mostly it would force Nidoqueen to play some mind games. Mostly just kind of a defensive utility piece to try and get chip on some of the more annoying things I was expecting. Latias, great speed tier here. Great coverage options, great support options. It took me a while to kind of settle on what eventually I was going to bring on it. But, I felt pretty confident that it was coming for a while. And then we have both water types, the Volcanion and the Primarina. Primarina just has incredible stabs in this matchup. You don't have great water resists, especially at least Kartana. Kartana's not a water resist. Okay, it's not a special water resist. And having, Moonblast to threaten the Hydreigon. I thought it had a great matchup here. And then Volcanion has, fire moves for the Kartana, has water moves to hit Nidoqueen. It can hit Bronzong and Swampert pretty strongly. It just, of the other, kind of Pokemon that I was questioning bringing, it just seemed like it had the kind of highest floor in the matchup.
Yeah, I do think I agree with most of all that. Of the 6 that I thought you'd bring, I think Zero was the only one that was missing, and actually the Cobalion was the one that I was missing on there. Actually kind of forced Ferrothorn into the matchup over Glaceon, I thought in my mind there, because I thought the steel types looked pretty darn good here, but I thought he'd only end up getting one of them, particularly the secondary typing of fighting on Cobalion. I didn't think did you many favors, considering things like Hurricane and Moonblast would now hit it neutrally, especially on the weaker special defensive side there, for sure. Thunderous, definitely agree with all your sentiments, especially considering what it just did to me a couple weeks prior. Thunderous Incarnate seems like it was made to mess with my team. So worried about things like Thunderwave, a Scarfmon that was going out of control. As you said, just ahead of the Kartana too, which had just had a 6-0 sweep the week before. Again, built differently for my team, I thought. Ferrothorn, I thought, it's not that great, but then depending on whether I can bring Arcanine or not, or what kind of fire and fighting coverage and how strong it is in particular, it could be very tough to break through, and I thought maybe some of those hazards and Leech Seed games would be pretty good for you, especially because my 1 Leech Seed immunity could still get hit pretty hard by Body Press, while the Iron Barbs and high defensive Ferrothorn could mess with me pretty hard too. The Latios just seemed really solid in the matchup. Again, it's 1 base point higher than the Kartana, which pretty rough once again there too, and all the coverage it gets on what tends to be, I think, a slightly weaker special side for me as well, unless I had to bring something dedicated, a little bit rough for me. And the 2 water types, totally agree. Those were probably, along with Thunderous, the mons I was most afraid of, and it made a really difficult decision for me. Do I need to bring Volt Absorb or Water Absorb? I can't really deal with all of those, and the coverage that goes along with them too. As I said, Primarina, the fairy typing is just so beautiful. In a previous matchup against Sasbo and the Bulldors, I saw Feeny as probably the biggest problem because of that exact same stab duo, and it's really tough for me to deal with. And Volcanion, I actually have a few resists to them, but they just have the extra coverage moves to go along with it. If it's something like Specs, even a resist from Steam Eruption wouldn't be able to handle that. That was very tough to prep for. I think Volcanion, Primarina, and Thunderous were the 3 I was most afraid of. Do you have anything else that you have about your team in the matchup?
No. I mean, I think that definitely I was reacting to kind of some of the things that I would expect you to bring. Things like, kind of the speed tiers that you might bring with like the new Rabambi this week. Things like a defensive Arcanine, things like the bulky Lantern with Volt Absorb definitely colored a lot of my picks. And we'll see, kind of how you saw the matchup and if I was responding to the things I needed to.
Absolutely, and I had said it before, I thought this was a pretty awkward matchup, probably from both sides. As for me, yes, I do kind of agree it needed to be a little bit more of an offensive matchup, but again, the speed tiers really weren't all that favorable for me. I may need to end up bringing multiple Scarfs to be able to outspeed things, but boy, I really don't have any fantastic moves to lock into for coverage. I'll talk about this in a little bit, but it seems like there aren't that many 4x resistances, or 4x weaknesses, rather, to take advantage of on your team, and I think the type synergy itself lends itself really well, especially between a few of these mons, and say the Latios that can resist pretty much everything that's going for something like Volcanion. It was very tough to be able to say, I can lock into this, so I really can't have a choice scarf, but I also need to have that extra power anyways. It was very awkward to prepare for. What do you think about my team from what you were looking at?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about all these choice scarves, because looking at the matchup, I just, even before like I really looked at the matchup, I just felt in my heart of hearts that Rabambi was coming, and you say scarfs, and I heard webs. Especially because, I have not played well against hazards this season. Don't have a lot of removal on my team, I definitely was expecting that to be your speed control of choice.
I think that's totally fair. Going into some of the months that I chose not to bring, Kangaskhan, I have not been able to bring yet, but I also kind of felt that this is probably the best example of something that needs to prey on those big weaknesses, which I didn't really see coming, especially considering Obstagoon probably wasn't going to make it there, and Ferrothorn, even a Fire Punch, really doesn't do that much to Ferrothorn. It probably beats me one-on-one anyways, which was kind of awkward. It does have the ability to do things like Pass Wishes, but considering I was expecting an offensive-style gameplay and something like Volcanion and Primarina, I may not even be able to take a couple hits from. Even trying to Wish Pass wasn't really in the cards there. Another one that I kind of had at the bottom of my list here was Swampert. It really sucks. I've really enjoyed Swampert whenever I've been able to bring it, but it seems like it's just maybe a tad too slow. It seems like those ones, the Volcanion, Glaceon, Primarina, all grouped up there are relatively low speed and relatively easy to outspeed thus. And maybe even Swampert could do it something against them, but I didn't think I could invest the speed to be able to try and beat them. And in any case, Volcanion and Glaceon would be able to beat it anyways. Couldn't exactly spam Flip Turn because of Volcanion possibility of switching in. Even things like the Latias that I couldn't touch too well, or Thunderous potentially packing Grass Knot. I thought those two mons were kind of at the bottom of my to-bring list. What do you think?
Kangaskhan, I agree with what you're saying. It just doesn't have anything that it obviously does. There's nothing that it obviously walls. There's nothing that it obviously, offensively counters. I definitely get what you're saying there. And yeah, I thought Swampert was pretty good here, but the big thing was that I didn't think that you could bring both Lantern and Swampert, and Lantern is just so much better in this matchup.
Especially with me kind of realizing as we got close to the matchup how good Ferrothorn was, and Swampert just really can't do anything about that. Gets punished for switching out even. I suppose the next two we should talk about are the two mods I have near the top that I chose not to bring. Similarly to how you didn't bring Zera, I did not bring the Tornadus Therian, nor the Hydreigon, which I hinted about the Tornadus a little bit. It is outsped by the Zera and hit by that stab. Similarly, Thunderous, while I do outspeed it, I'm really not doing that much damage back to the Thunderous. And Thunderous, obviously, with Electric Stab, can hit that pretty hard too. And that was kind of the theme from what I saw. Yes, Hurricane can hit things hard, even if it had 100% accuracy, which I feel like you kind of have to assume that it does in order to justify bringing Tornadus Therian every week. It wasn't even doing that terribly much unless I was heavily investing. And say I was to Hurricane into a Volcanion. Okay, I'm going to take quite a bit back. I can regenerate it off, but now I have to switch into something else. I really cannot switch into the biggest threats you have, especially those water mons. I don't even resist anything that Primarina or Volcanion has, so I'd have to invest heavily in Spadef. I didn't really think I could bring it or even have enough moves to be able to cover everything I wanted to. Similarly, Hydreigon outsped by too many things here too. Not just the Zero, which could have fighting coverage very easily and potentially Fairy. But once again, the Thunderous, even if I'm immune to Prankster, I know you can run Focus Blast. Latias, it's a Dragon on Dragon matchup. Probably the one that's faster is going to win that, and I wasn't too confident about that. Cobalion is probably the biggest reason that I wouldn't be able to spam Dark Pulse against your team. Otherwise, if I did think that Cobalion and Obstagoon wouldn't come, Dark Pulse looks pretty nice and spammable, but there is also a big problem in the Primarina, which I just had zero way to take down with Hydreigon if I was locked into something, especially not. But otherwise, Primarina stops it pretty much in its tracks. So I didn't think I could bring this 200 and 180 point mons. Were those surprising at all to you?
The Hydreigon was surprising, and hearing you talk about it, I mean, it 100% makes sense. Yeah, Primarina does somewhat invalidate it, but I still thought something like a Scarf set, with, Dark Pulse, Draco Meteor, U-Turn, other coverage move of your choice, would have been pretty dang good, especially because, I've got those resists, but, you could play around those. They wouldn't be the hardest of predictions to make. And the Tornadus, kind of similarly, the Hydreigon and Tornadus, I think, both fell into the camp where they didn't look amazing, but they're just such good Pokemon that, I just had to keep them in mind because, as those, kind of like that 6th and 7th kind of Pokemon, they're just so good. You're not going to regret bringing them really, because they're just good Pokemon. So I was a little surprised not to see them, but I wouldn't say I was expecting your plan to revolve around them either.
I think that's fair. The last one that I didn't bring probably the most surprising for you from the little bit that we've chatted. It's the Arcanine that didn't come at 4 and 0. I was looking for a set for Arcanine that would be able to handle everything that I wanted to. Frankly, I just could not find it. I know that we had the possibility of something like Wild Charge and maybe Flare Blitz for Ferrothorn, and have maybe an offensive set there to break through things. And we also had the possibility to potentially have a Toxic set with Fire Move, which could really help break through just about everything pretty well, so long as I can get the Toxic in on the right things, maybe even stall out a little bit for the Water Mons. But I really didn't feel like it fit in anywhere super well in particular. Again, with what I anticipated to be kind of an offensive match, I kind of, we'll get into it obviously in the team builder itself, kind of split up the team half and half, offensive and defensive. Arcanine could have ridden the line potentially, but I felt like Nidoqueen did that a whole lot better, and Arcanine itself, I couldn't find room for it, which I know, as we've talked, looks pretty decent in the matchup, but didn't end up coming.
Yeah, it was by far the biggest surprise that Intimidate just seemed so good. It had coverage for Primarina and Volcanion, which, could be obvious switch-ins to it. E-Speed is powerful and smacks those faster threats like the Zera and the Thundurus, who aren't particularly bulky. The ability to, be defensive with, Morning Sun, Teleport, it just seemed like it offered so much utility that I was pretty shocked it didn't come. But yeah, if you're expecting this kind of slugfest of a match, then I can see how Arcanine was a little bit too much of kind of both worlds and not enough of one to really clinch a spot on the team here.
I guess I'll kind of go three at a time here. The three that end up kind of being the defensive break apart a little bit core were the Nidoqueen, Lantern, and Bronzong. We talked a little bit about how good the Nidoqueen Lantern in particular looked in the matchup. Probably my 1 and 2 for bringing, but Nidoqueen, Lantern, Bronzong providing a little bit of a defensive core, in a sense at least. Nidoqueen, as we've said, it looks like it can tear through just about everything. Unlike something like Swampert, it has that speed tier where it could potentially even outspeed a max speed Volcanion, unless it was Scarf, which I thought maybe could potentially come. But Nidoqueen, tough to be OHKO'd by just about anything. Even coverage options like Psychic from Thundee I knew wouldn't be able to OHKO. It would take something like a Stab Psychic from Latias or a Stab Water Move to be able to OHKO it. And if I can just get that bit of chip off or get something into range of something else, that may have just have been worth it by itself. I think Nidoqueen could have put in a ton of work there. Lantern, the resistances, and obviously picking between the immunities, they were both just incredible in the matchup, being able to immune either water or electric, especially being able to punish something like a choice item from the water moves if I chose Water Absorb, or even just resisting it, I thought was a little too good to pass up. And the Bronzong as well, I knew rocks would be very important, as we said. Hazard's not particularly a strong suit for you. I saw Toxic Spikes rip through your team just a little bit ago. I know these couple transactions you made should really help with that, but I ended up going actually with all three instead of Toxic Spikes, just a more offensive Toxic approach. All three of those monsters, Nidoqueen, Swampert, and Bronzong, trying to wear down your team for the other half we'll get to in a little bit, but that was kind of the general idea of those three defensive mons coming.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. Lantern, yeah, is just so good, especially punishing something like, Zero Aura wanting to have, like, maybe a Choice Scarf to outspeed your Scarf, a Choice Band to give it a little more power, preventing Volt switches. It's just so disruptive to that. Disruptive to the Thundurus, has just fantastic special bulk, a real pain. The Nidoqueen, the 76 is not a great base speed, but against, base 70 and lower, especially when, all the ones above it, the Latias is really the only one who's threatening to OHKO you. Yeah, an absolute monster, and something I was terrified of through the entire prep. And then Bronzong's, I love Bronzong. Yeah, it's just solid and reliable all the time. Could get up some hazards here, maybe a screen or something, live a hit, get some chip on something else for a teammate. You can't go really wrong bringing it, so I like it.
And I think something I'd forgotten to bring up with Arcanine as well, that the fact that it is a freeze dry resist for Glaceon, I thought I definitely would want to bring something for that in that capacity, and Bronzong fit that quite well. And then the last three that I brought were kind of the offensive core. As you so astutely guessed, I am bringing the Rabombi, also the Kartana, and then maybe the big surprise pick being the Sock there at the bottom. Starting at the top, Rabombi, correctly identified. The speed tier is pretty nice. Fairy looks pretty spammable. Yes, we have a couple of resists there, the Volcanion and the Ferrothorn stand out really, especially the Volcanion also resisting Bug, but even just getting that chip off on something could be incredibly valuable. What an amazing stab, and also just the threat of webs, as we also talked about a little bit, getting the speed advantage on some key threats could be really nice, or even just presenting the threat of it. We'll talk about that in a bit. Kartana, as we also said too, whether it's Scarf or not, I also heavily considered a speed boosting set here too. There are a lot of different capacities that Kartana can work in. We've seen how strong it is just the past couple of weeks. It's really started to come into its own a little bit on my team. Definitely enough reason to be scared of it. And then what I'm probably most excited to hear about, the sock actually came. Yes, I had to bring it in one of these final 3 weeks, but I actually think it had a pretty good time here. Fighting is, I think, a relatively spammable stab move against your team. With Runerigus not coming, Latios is really the only sturdy resist I see for that close combat coming in, and it also has access to, as you also pointed out, one of my favorite new moves in knockoff. So Sock actually relatively spammable into the team, especially if we can either get a boot sturdy set or maybe something like a choice item to up the power or speed. So those are my 3 attackers. What are you thinking about those?
Yeah, no, the Rabambi, I just knew it was coming. Like you said, speed tier, good stabs, a lot of useful, utility options as well. Kartana is Kartana. It's a monster. I knew it was coming. I might not have given this thing quite the respect it needed during team prep. More just, I knew it was coming. I knew it was going to be scary, and I said, well, I have ways to deal with it. I'm just going to have to figure out how to deal with it during the match. The sock, I wasn't entirely surprised to see, but yeah, it's certainly, a lower tier mon. It's good. It's got great abilities. It's got solid stats. But, one of those lower tier mons, especially, kind of the week after you pick it up, not really sure what it's going to do. Could be sturdy to live and revenge a big threat, maybe a setup, something I set up with. Could be scarfed, could be banded. So, I really think all of those options can work here, and I don't, find any fault with bringing any of those 3.
Well, now that we know the 6 months that each of us are bringing, let's take a look at what we actually brought on those 6 for this matchup. And here we are with the team, starting off with the Route 1 Birbs squad of 6. Like we talked a little bit about, those water types start us off with Volcanion.
Yeah, so overall this team was offensively minded, centered around these water types, the Volcanion and the Primarina. Volcanion here, for moves I went with dual stabs, and then, some good coverage options, Earth Power for Lantern, Focus Blast for Hydreigon. The item is a Blunder Policy. Oh boy, Blunder Policy is really gimmicky, but my dumb brain loved it, and at +2 speed, this Volcanion actually threatens a lot of things. I went Modest for the extra power. This is getting, at worst, rolls to O-code anything that's not really, invested in defense. And at +2, with, Tailwind support that we'll see later on, or getting that Blunder Policy, I outspeed a Scarf Sock and a Scarf Modest Hydreigon. So this thing, definitely the Blunder Policy is a bit gimmicky, but if it gets set up, it has a chance to do absolutely incredible damage. What do you think about this stupid idea of mine?
Well, I kind of feel like going in, my idea of the Volcanion was I was very scared of something like Scarf because the speed, I figured it'd probably have to have all 4 of these moves for that coverage. I think you definitely picked correctly. Maybe something like Substitute or Flame Charge would have been kind of scary. But to that extent, I guess my main concern was to make sure it wasn't set up or to discover its choice item if it had that as soon as possible. If it's Blunder Policy, that's something I really wouldn't be able to stop. So this is actually much more terrifying than just about anything that I had come up with previously. Good stuff here with the Blunder Policy.
Yeah. I also, of course, note that I'm running, Steam Eruption can miss, Fire Blast can miss, Focus Miss can miss. So definitely looking for opportunities to try and proc that.
Alright, let's move on to the Primarina, the other half of the Water Geo, and here's the choice Scarf.
Here is the choice Scarf. I went for hard-hitting stabs here with the Moonblast and the Hydro Pump for just big damage. Blizzard is a coverage option. It will OHKO Kartana and absolutely chunk Thunderous if it's not investing in special defense. Then, of course, flip turn, great to have a pivot move on your choice Scarfer. The speed investment, the timid nature, the choice Scarf, and the EVs I put in there is going to actually exactly speed creeps something trying to speed creep an adamant Zeraora, which I was just able to do. Primarina, even with the Choice Scarf, isn't that fast, but I was able to just get over that, and of course, Zeraora having such great speed would not be unlikely that I'd be running Adamant, so if you were trying to just creep that, then, I've got a couple points there to get that. And then, trying to just kind of get it in, get some cheeky KOs on like a Kartana or Tornadus, and just try and if Volcanion was kind of the set up and sweep, even though set up is miss a Focus Blast, which is weird. But this was just send it in, apply pressure, get a surprise KO before you figure out the scarf and see what I can do with it there.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the speed creeping. That's kind of one of the dangers of speed creeping. There are so many different things you have to take into consideration whenever you cheat a little bit on speed. This is something that could definitely take advantage of that. I think I'd said it before. I thought the Volcanion was a little more likely to be scarfed, but this outspeeds just about the same things that the Volcanion would have anyway, so I guess I don't really see an issue with it. I was expecting something more like a Specs, because I know the damage coming from this thing is ridiculous, but frankly it's about the same for the Volcanion too, and just naturally they have such good matchups, they can get away with a Choice Scarf pretty well here. And then on to the defensive court, we have the two Steel types. We're going to go right into the Ferrothorn.
Yeah, Ferrothorn here is just here as, physical bulk, useful resists. It's, got spikes here to break any sashes and potentially sturdy on the sock if it came, as well as provides much better chip damage. You've noted how strong your team has actually performed against rocks this season with all your resists. The Pokemon that are weak are frequently running boots like Tornadus. So Spikes was just way better here than Rocks, and I wanted something to be able to get some chip, break some sashes and such. Leech Seed is here for, just recovery and more chip damage, then Power Whip to hit Lantern, and Nidoqueen if I happen to get the chance. If you, for example, switch in on a turn I might be setting up like another turn of Spikes, and Body Press, if I happen to be able to land it against a Kartana, would be great. Not that I'm necessarily planning on it. I have here the Akka Berry to live random Fire-type move from, like, the Nidoqueen, or a Heat Wave from Tornadus, or not anything I was particularly looking to live, but just, something to give me an extra turn to be able to set up something like a Spike, or get that big Power Whip chip off on a Nidoqueen.
Yeah, I think Ferrothorn became more and more likely bring as I got closer and closer to the match. Yes, I agree, Spikes are definitely better than Stealth Rock, and yes, Leech Seed is pretty nice considering my only grass type that would be immune to that. Not exactly the sturdiest thing in Body Press, obviously a nice compliment to that. An interesting thing I thought about as we got closer to is the potential for Assault Vest on Ferrothorn. I thought that could be kind of interesting, give it a little bit more bulk, and I thought there were a ton of different moves, not just these couple here, but Knockoff as well would have been very interesting. Even something cheeky like Bulldoze could have been kind of cute too. I just thought there were some interesting things Ferrothorn could do here. This definitely makes sense to me as the four moves he chose. Though really like the Spikes tech on there. Not sure if it's a tech necessarily, but without Stealth Rocks and Spikes instead, definitely I think the right move. And the other portion of this, the one that actually did have the Assault Vest, once again just one off, is the other Steel type, the Cobalion.
Oh, I love Assault Vest on Cobalion. It doesn't have great special bulk, but it's got 91 HP, decent special defense, good physical defense already. Just slap an Assault Vest on there, and it's just a solid all-around bulky piece. Here, it was coming as a Hydreigon and Lantern switch in, so that's why the Assault Vest was all the better. Be able to come in on a Draco easier, or a Dark Pulse, or, anything from the Lantern. Then, I've just got Stone Edge, Close Combat, and Zen Headbutt to, do great damage on pretty much everything, and then Volt Switch as a pivot option here. It was just really here to switch into the special attackers and kind of over time break down walls, with a Close Combat here or there, or a Stone Edge, to really open up things for the Volcanion and Primarina down the line.
It's not the strongest, actually base 90 attack. I would from my use of Cobalion, I really love the utility it brings. It doesn't look like the typical steel type. It doesn't necessarily have the recovery. It's fast, not as bulky on the special defense side, but really love the move pool that has opened up here for it too. I was kind of assuming, yeah, close combat, maybe Stealth Rock's going to be in there, maybe the Volt Switch, but we were able to find 4 really nice coverage moves to be able to hit everything. That Zen Headbutt stands out to me a little bit too as something that can take care of the poison and fighting types that I am actually bringing here as well. And then we have the 2 mons that are off the ground for you, special attackers, and a little bit of utility mixed in there. We've got the boots on Thunderous.
Yeah, so Thunderous, I was really scared about webs. Webs were all in my head during this matchup. So that was Thunderous was here, it has stab and coverage options again to, just get off solid chip and bring things in range of more hits from Volcanion and Primarina. Then I struggled so much about the last move, substitute, defog, thunderwave, nasty plot, another coverage option, knock off. There's so many things to go in that slot, but in the end I was just too scared about the webs. My plan was to outspeed things with a, random speed boosting things for Primarina and Volcanion, and just webs would shut that down pretty hard, so I just had to put in the defog over something like a Thunder Wave.
Yes, there were several things I was very worried about with this one. 125 special attack. It doesn't have the Thunderous Theory informed special attack, but this is plenty fine. Look how good that coverage is against basically my entire team. Once again, a nice little psychic move there for those couple options that I know I'm bringing too. Thunderwave was definitely the thing I was the most afraid of. As we'll see in a little bit, I had a lot of speed on my team, and I was very afraid that something's sweep or revenge tour or something would be cut short by a T-Wave. Maybe even a little bit thankful that's just the defog, but man, otherwise rocks or something similar would have looked really nice against your team. So still, no matter what, probably the right call to go with a safe defog here. And the last member is going to be, I love Eject Pack so much. I've actually brought this on Latios myself before.
Yeah, you keep saying that I'm just mimicking you throughout this season, and maybe I am, I don't know. But yeah, this Latios is offensive support to try to get in and enable Volcanion and Primarina. Draco is fairly spammable. Aura Sphere is here to hit Kartana, as well as, Bronzong neutrally. Probably should have been Mystical Fire, that would also hit Ribombee and could be some useful special attack drops here and there, but not having, having a non-Draco option against Hydreigon was nice. The Eject Pack is there to keep momentum that, Draco can frequently lose you, because that special attack drop can often mean you need to switch at the next turn. I can drop a Draco, switch into something like Scarf Primarina, and really keep momentum and pressure with that. And then we get to the last 2 moves. Tailwind, that doubling speed really, like I said, lets Volcanion go to town for the turns it's up, as well as, put Primarina above, even any fast Scarfers that you have. Could let Cobalion outspeed something like the Kartana or the Tornadus. Just great utility. And then Healing Wish was another thing that my brain just saw and was like, ooh, shiny button. But I actually thought it was pretty cool tech here. The ability to, say, set up a Tailwind, get in... set up a Tailwind, drop a Draco Meteor, get the Eject Pack to switch into Volcanion in that Tailwind, go to town with that. Volcanion takes some chip, some damage, I get him back out. Later in the game, I Tailwind again, and then I Healing Wish to bring in the Volcanion in another set of Tailwind, bring it back up to full health, give, someone a second life to kind of clean through the team in the late game. I thought was a really cool idea, and just something that I had to go with.
There are 2 things that stand out that make Latios a little bit different than Latios. One, of course, the added extra bulk. We see the special attack and special defense swapped, so it's a little bit bulkier, and that meant that I was definitely a little bit worried about something like a Calm Mind setup set. The other thing it does have is that Healing Wish, so good on you for making use of kind of its unique trait here that separates it, and considering the overall game plan, that just makes a lot of sense. There isn't that much momentum on the team either, but Tailwind plus Eject Pack Draco and Healing Wish, 2 ways to get to Tailwind, makes a whole lot of sense to me, and especially considering those water types, and maybe the Thundurus too, look like they are poised to rip through the team. Any other thoughts on your team before we move on?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just I always feel like building for I always enjoy my matches against you because I always think that I always try to catch you off guard with something, and it's always fun to see what I come up with. And the Blunder Policy, the Scarf Primarina, the Tailwind Healing Wish, maybe not the safest, most consistent options, but all just going over this team again, it's just so fun.
It seems like a lot of our matches come down to your ridiculous ideas working compared to can my more generally fundamental plays still stop that? And that's such an interesting, fun battle, honestly, for both sides. Speaking of, we get to move on to my team over here with a beautiful, different background. And I'm decided to start off here with the Nidoqueen. To start with, it's relatively the same sets I continue to bring every week. Nidoqueen has just been an incredible breaker all season so far. We've got the dual stabs. It's relatively obvious. It hits so many things on your team so hard. There's some incredible complementary coverage. Flamethrower was my coverage move here for the Ferrothorn in particular. I felt like I didn't have a lot of great ways to hit that, especially considering I wasn't bringing Tornadus with Heat Wave, not bringing Hydreigon with Flamethrower, not bringing the Arcanine with just about anything. So I felt I needed at least one extra way to be able to hit through that. And then rather than bringing something like Ice Beam, which could have hit the Latias in particular a whole lot harder, or even Thunderbolt, which could have hit those water types, which I already hit with dual stabs, I actually decided on a Toxic for that last move. I did mention how scared I would have of something like set up Latias, as well as just a couple of random potential switch-ins. I think one of the big weaknesses of Nidoqueen is if you can out-predict it and swap in on a resisted move, you can then pretty easily outspeed it. Mind you, I have the speed to outspeed all Volcanion without a boost, but still, with the ability to go in and out of everything, and maybe I don't want to overpredict and still get chip or damage onto something, and say it's a Volcanion in, you go out into the Latias, there's no move that I can click that hits everything super well, except for maybe that Sludge Wave, but Toxic will definitely put a timer on the Latias, and without Refresh Stretch, I thought that was a little bit better. This is definitely not the only member with Toxic as well, and Life Orb, of course, just to get a little bit more damage. 75 special tech isn't the best, maxed out on that. What do you think of the Nidoqueen?
I mean, yeah, this is just a pretty standard Nidoqueen set. When you think Nidoqueen, you think it's gonna have a Life Orb. It's probably gonna have 3 or 4 attacks, and then maybe a move like Toxic or Stealth Rocks, depending on the matchup. I'm a little bit surprised to not see something to hit the Latias, but I can certainly understand Toxic getting it on just something early, and it can really, really make the rest of the game a lot simpler to think about when you realize, all right, I hit a wall or an offensive piece or something, and I've already limited the extent to which it can influence the match. So I think it's certainly a fine choice here.
Absolutely, and according with the offensive pieces that come later, getting just that little bit of chip could help quite a bit and potentially stop some of that switching, or encourage it so that I can get that chip onto more things. Our second member with Toxic is going to be Bronzong. I needed Hazard somewhere on here. Stealth Rock felt like it just was a nice fit with Bronzong in the slot. Heavy Slam and Body Press are the 2 attacking moves. It was probably the best consistent damage I had to get against just about everything. I felt like there were a lot of things that could actually wall Bronzong really well and set up, which is why I wanted to make sure I had Toxic and probably the hardest hitting moves I could have. Colbur Berry on there because there were a couple of knockoff users I was particularly worried about. If, for example, Thundurus was trying to break through it a little bit like that, wouldn't be able to. Obstagoon, this became a pretty good check to that with the Body Press as well as the Colbur Berry as well, just in case that was coming. And once again, Toxic spreading around everywhere. Physical defense, we're going to have the special defensive partner. There weren't too many things that were physically offensive that I wanted to stop, but maybe the main one is the Zero Aura, which is the final knockoff user I really wanted to have a bit of health against. Being able to Toxic that, Body Press that down into range of something else that will be coming, I thought was very valuable for the team. And once again, you don't need too much special defense as long as you can wall the Freeze Dry from the Glaceon. So that's kind of the thought behind the Bronzong.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's not a standout set, but for the kinds of things that like Bronzong can do, and especially when we were talking about, this being an offensively oriented match. Kind of similar to like my idea with my Ferrothorn is you have this piece that has good bulk, good resists, can switch into things, and you're just looking to get, the chip, a body press off on, a Cobalion or a Ferrothorn or something, that just brings it just solves kind of the end game for enabling the rest of your team. I think this is a great set and, a great utility for the matchup.
I guess the last thing to mention is I did go Heat Proof over Levitate again here. We were kind of on the same mind. You came up with a little bit late, but I was expecting something like Mystical Fire on the Latias as well, and otherwise this was a pretty nice check to that, even without special defense, and once again trying to lay a Toxic on that. Move on to the final Toxic piece, which was this Lantern. Scald Volt Switch Toxic seemed almost immediately obvious to me to try and put on here, along with leftovers, along with max special defense. That all is pretty easy. The last move, there were a few different slots, things I could have done here, I think. Last week I had run Ice Beam for a Dragonite, you have a little bit of coverage there. Heal Bell is obviously something you can look at too, but I was a little bit more worried about the offensive power from your team, and I kind of like the idea of Protect because it can help stack up things like the leftovers recovery that Lantern is getting, especially if I'm swapping in on rocks. Get one turn lefties, protect, now I'm back up to pretty much where I was before switching into rocks, as well as having 3 toxic users. Being able to stack that up felt really important to me. Plus, if I was expecting one of the water types to potentially be choice locked, or even anything else being choice locked, that was a really nice way, I thought, to try and scout that out. We saw its effectiveness in week 1 against Chad, scouting out the choice scarf on the Kiram. Thought it might be able to put in just a little bit of work here too. Protect me, one of the more underrated moves in Draft League.
Yeah, no, I think this Pokemon is sneakily kind of the most influential in this matchup. Lantern, it's a pretty low-tier Pokemon, but, doing the calcs for this matchup, just max HP, max special defense, it can take so many special hits. It's kind of crazy. It doesn't have, recovery options, but you have the leftovers on there, and Protect, let you get those. This is pretty much what I was expecting. Volt Absorb to, shut down my electric types. And then, it was that 4th move, like you were talking about. Protect, like you said, it lets you scout choice Pokemon, it lets you get extra lefties recovery, it lets you get extra toxic damage, it lets you stall out field conditions. It's a great move. I was probably expecting Heal Bell over it just because I thought this was going to be such a pivotal Pokemon that if I was able to get something like a Toxic off on it, you'd want that to be able to get rid of that, as well as if you're afraid of something, like T-Wave from Thundurus, that, it would be useful for that. But your logic behind this set is completely sound. It's just perfect for the matchup.
Yeah, we would have to be a little bit careful. It feels like Pharaoh is a switch into this every time, so probably clicking Volt Switch or prioritizing clicking Volt Switch a little bit more often in this matchup too. Then the offensive core here, I do bring Ribombee for the first time all season, and there is in fact one move that is very much missing because I went with a choice spec set with dual stabs, U-turn for momentum, and then the last move that we'll talk about in just a moment. We've got speed for the Thundurus in particular, I believe, to make sure we outspeed that. I really like the idea of choice specs Moonblast. I looked at the calcs of +1 Moonblast and I was so impressed with them. I thought, great, we'll just click Quiver Dance, and I'm not actually sure when I'm clicking Quiver Dance against this team. Especially if I'm expecting something offensive, it would be really neat to be able to set that up, say, against a Primarina, where I can get that special defense boost as well. But I didn't feel like there were that many opportunities for it. I'd still get blasted so incredibly hard by just about everything. I don't exactly have recovery on here as well, or the room for it. So I actually went with choice specs for the immediate damage. Looking at some fun calcs, Bug Buzz actually doing a little over a third, I believe, to even Thundurus as a resist, so really cool and spammable. For the last move, I did put Switcheroo in there. Again, I don't have that many options for Ferrothorn, so I kind of decided, well, if I think that is going to be the main switch and Switcheroo with choice specs onto that, it's neutered entirely. It's only going to be able to, worst case scenario, set up spikes, I think, because it can just set up 3 layers, and that's about it. I'm totally fine with that, stopping its recovery in its tracks. As for Sticky Web, and why I did not bring Sticky Web, I felt like the 2 main things that I really wanted to outspeed that I just barely could not were Thundurus and Latias, and neither of those are susceptible to the webs. I really liked the speed gap between those and the Volcanion, ignoring the Obstagoon for a little bit because I didn't think it was too particularly likely to come. Even Cobalion, I thought maybe it'll come, maybe not. But that speed gap, I felt really good about being able to stack up a little bit there, or already being able to outspeed the things that I wish I had that extra speed on were not grounded. So I actually did not end up going with Sticky Webs. And that aside, I felt like maybe if this was coming, you'd prioritize getting a lead or something to match up well against Sticky Webs, or prioritize removing them or keeping something around to remove them, when in fact that was not the threat at all. It was in fact the offensive Moonblast from choice specs that was the value in the Rabambi.
Oh, you got me good with this one. You got me good. I'm so surprised not to see webs, even on a choice set, because you talk about the specs Moonblast, and even Bug Buzz into certain Pokemon. It does do really really good damage. You're right about that. Switcheroo is, yeah. I'm not sure if I was in your place. In your place, I probably still would have put webs there. People, you can put non-attacking moves on your choice set. It's perfectly okay if they provide the utility you need. And something like webs, then making Nidoqueen a threat for so many other options, and neutralizing scarfs and stuff like that. I'd probably have still relied on that, but Switcheroo, what am I switching into this thing? Probably something like the Ferrothorn and giving it a choice specs and getting you're getting back a leftovers, you're getting back an assault vest, you're getting back maybe a resist berry. It's a great set, and I really think you hit the nail on the head here.
Kind of interesting. I brought this thing over Slurpuff because I thought this is the more reliable, better web setter, and I use it for something else entirely in its first showing. So how about that? Something that will probably stay consistent, though, is the next one. It's the Kartana, and it's a choice scarf. I think the second time this season I'm bringing a scarf. It should be relatively obvious. I'm outsped by 1 and 2 base points by 2 of the biggest threats to my opponent's team here, so we can just kind of go adamant, slap a scarf on, outspeed all 0 Aura at least, and just kind of go to town. Those stabs put in so much work. Leaf Blade in particular, knockoff, it's not a stab, but come on, I'm going to be running knockoff every single week on this. We already know how much I love it, and it's about the only way to be able to even hit the Latias at all, which is maybe a little bit unfortunate, but that's kind of how it has to be. Oh no, I have to spam knockoff, that's so horrible. And Sacred Sword is about the only way I have to hit the steel types, so those 3 moves obviously absolutely needed to be there, and Defog was just kind of an emergency. As I said, there was a worst case scenario where there were a bunch of spikes going down, and maybe Stealth Rocks too, or something like that. And maybe I really just need to get rid of that. Maybe I can bring this in a little bit earlier in a match, force a switch out, and then on that switch out defog and be able to get Kartana in a little bit later without taking all that chip. So that's kind of the general idea. It's Kartana. It's relatively straightforward, but I love being able to run an Adamant Nature on it, get over 500 attack base points before even applying Choice Scarf or potential Beast Boosts.
Yeah, no, I think Scarf Kartana is very strong. It's got so much attack, even, resisted hits, you're going to be wearing things down and then, set up to, clean and sweep in the late game. But yeah, no, I mean, Leaf Blade, Knockoff, Sacred Sword, those are pretty much the attacks Kartana runs. Like you said, they just have great utility against a bunch of my team. I like the defog for that 4th slot, especially on a scarfed Kartana. That last slot is usually going to be for something like a Sword Stance, a Substitute, something like that. And for your choice, you're not going to be clicking those, so defog is a great just contingency option there. And I think really the impressive thing about Kartana is that it's one of the scariest Pokemon to have in the back during a match, because until you reveal whether it's Banded, whether it's Setup, whether it's Scarf, having that information would be astronomical in helping someone to play against it, and just keeping that a mystery, they have to consider and keep so many different options to check it later in the game, that I think this is just a great bring.
And I kind of like that with the idea of a breaker like Nidoqueen, able to break through some of the potential checks or get something low enough that Cortana can more easily spam one or two of those moves. Again, one of the issues is Leaf Blade is the only thing I have to hit your Primarina, Knockoff is the only thing I have to hit your Latias, and Sacred Sword is the only thing I have to hit your Steels. So I do still need to be able to break early in order to get to a point where Cortana can just spam that one move, which, oh no, what a horrible problem to have. I need to pick one move to spam with 500 attack, but to kind of help and supplement that a little bit too, at the end or just before the end, I do actually have a second choice scarfer, and it is the Sock. Close combat, Earthquake, Knockoff all seem relatively easy and standard. Thunder Punch at the end, I thought this was relatively spammable. It's pretty much either this or Poison Jab, something to hit the Primarina with. I went with Thunder Punch because it could also hit the Volcanion super effectively. I figured those two may be something you keep in the back, even if this is something that Latias resists, and as well as having the Mold Breaker too meant that Thunder Punch wasn't immune by anything aside from the Runerigus, which I actually really valued there as well. We had just enough speed for Adamant Zero Aura. We've talked about it a bit. Zero outspeeds the Rabombi by 19 base points, so potentially going Adamant. This is exactly the kind of speed tier that you were looking for, but I can outspeed Adamant Zero Aura with this. Again, Mold Breaker over Sturdy. My only defog option was on a Choice Scarf Cortana, and that's definitely just an emergency button. I didn't want to have to rely on Sturdy not being broken, as comparing that to wanting to be able to spam one move or another. I've talked about how good fighting is against the team, but Earthquake could potentially open up too, if I need to get that Mold Breaker ability off on something with Levitate. If I need to be able to freely Thunder Punch because Zero Aura is low and nothing else is there, I want to be able to just have a move to spam at the end game or just before the end game, and maybe it's a little bit weird, but that's why I went with Mold Breaker.
No, I think that makes so much sense. Sock, a lower tier Pokemon that people don't think about, but look at that base 125 attack, and with the Choice Scarf you can run Adamant. Mold Breaker complements that so much. It just lets Earthquake be spammable. I can't, switch in Latias to try and avoid it. I've got, the Thundurus, but, my Ferrothorn is a grass type that doesn't resist it. It just becomes so spammable. Like you said, Thunder Punch, relatively spammable. You can even hit, the Volt Absorb, Zero Aura. And, there's close combat is spammable. Knockoff is a great move to spam. I think this is a great set to showcase a lower point Mon and really lean into its strengths.
So there's our two teams of 6. I would love to say that next up is the battle, but this is a two-part series here. Thank you to Michael for joining me on my channel. The battle will actually be on the main channel. Definitely go check out the feature match. Michael hosts that every single week here on the Wooper Club channel. Go to that channel. Go check out the battle. But otherwise, we're going to see you next time for week 6 here. Do not miss this battle. This is a good one. We'll see you there.